back, everybody. Here we go with chapter 43, a conjugal scene. At the palace, at the place Louis XV, the three young men separated. Debray drove on till he reached the house of Monsieur Danglars, arriving there just as Madame de Villefort's landau drove up to the door with Mademoiselle Danglars. Debray was the first to enter the courtyard, and with the air of a man on familiar footing at the house, he threw the bridle to a footman and handed the Baroness from the carriage and into the house. Oh, that was Madame Danglars, sorry. At the door of her room, the Baroness met Mademoiselle Cornélie, her confidential maid. "What is my daughter doing?" she asked her. "She practiced the whole evening and then went to bed," replied Mademoiselle Cornélie. "I seem to hear her at the piano now. That is Mademoiselle Louise d'Armilly, who is playing to Mademoiselle Danglars while she is in bed." "Very well," said Madame Danglars. "Come and undress me." They entered the bedroom. Debray stretched himself out on a large settee, and Madame Danglars went into her dressing room with Mademoiselle Cornélie. "My dear Monsieur Lucien," said Madame Danglars through the door, "you are always complaining that Eugénie does not do you the honor of addressing a word to you." "I am not the only one to make such complaints, madame," said Lucien, playing with the Baroness's little dog, which, recognizing him as a friend of the house, was making a great fuss of him. "I believe I heard Morcof tell you the other day that he could not get a single word out of his betrothed." "It is true," said Madame Danglars, "but I think that will change, and one of these days you will see Eugénie at your office." "At my office?" "That is to say, at the minister's office." "What for?" "To ask for an engagement at the opera house. Really, I have never known such an infatuation for music. It is ridiculous in a society girl." Debray smiled as he said, "Well, let her come with your consent and the Baron's, and we will try to give her an engagement in accordance with her merits." "You may go, Cornélie," said Madame Danglars. "I do not need you any more." Cornélie disappeared, and an instant later Madame Danglars emerged from her dressing room and seated herself beside Debray. She began to caress the little spaniel in a thoughtful mood. Lucien looked at her for a moment in silence. "Tell me frankly, Amine," he said presently, "what is it that's annoying you?" "Nothing," replied the Baroness. Suddenly the door opened and Monsieur Danglars entered. "Good evening, madame," said he. "Good evening, Monsieur Debray." The Baroness no doubt thought that this unexpected visit signified a desire to repair the sharp words he had uttered during the day. Assuming a dignified air, she turned to Lucien, and without answering her husband, said, "Read something to me, Monsieur Debray." "Excuse me," said the Baron, "you will tire yourself if you stay up too late, Baroness. It is 11 o'clock, and Monsieur has far to go." Debray was dumbfounded, for though Danglars' tone was perfectly calm and polite, he seemed to detect in it a certain determination to do his own will that evening and not his wife's. The Baroness was equally surprised, and showed it by a look which would no doubt have given her husband food for thought if he had not been busy reading the closing prices of shares in the paper. The haughty look was entirely lost on him. "Monsieur Lucien," said the Baroness, "I assure you I have not the least inclination for sleep. I have much to tell you this evening, and you shall listen to me though you go to sleep standing." "At your service, madame," replied Lucien phlegmatically. "My dear Monsieur Debray, don't ruin a good night's rest by staying here and listening to Madame Danglars' follies tonight," said Monsieur Danglars. "You can hear them just as well tomorrow. Besides, I claim tonight for myself, and with your permission I propose to talk over some important business matters with my wife." This time the blow was struck with such directness that Lucien and the Baroness were staggered. They exchanged looks as though each was asking the other for help in the face of such intrusion, but the irresistible power of the master of the house prevailed, and he gained the ascendancy. "Don't think I am turning you out, my dear Debray," continued Danglars. "Not in the least. Unforeseen circumstances oblige me to demand this interview of Madame tonight. It is such an unusual occurrence that I am sure you will bear me no ill will." Debray stammered out a few words, bowed, and left the room. "Do you know, monsieur," said the Baroness when Lucien had gone, "you are really making progress. As a rule you are merely churlish. Tonight you are brutal." "That is because I am in a worse temper tonight than usual," replied Danglars. "What is your bad temper to me?" replied the Baroness, irritated at her husband's impassiveness. "What have I to do with it? I have just lost 700,000 francs in the Spanish loan." And do you wish to make me responsible for your losses? Asked the Baroness with a sneer. Is it my fault that you have lost 700,000 francs? In any case, it is not mine. Once and for all, monsieur, I will not have you talk money with me, returned the Baroness sharply. It is a language I learnt neither with my parents nor in my first husband's house. The jingling of crowns being counted and recounted is odious to me, and there is nothing but the sound of your voice that I dislike more. That is really strange, replied Danglars. I always thought you took the greatest interest in my affairs. I should like to show me on what occasion. Oh, that's easily done. Last February, you were the first to tell me of the Haiti bonds. You dreamt that a ship had entered the harbor at Havre, bringing the news that a payment which had been looked on as lost was about to be effected. I know how clear-sighted your dreams are. On the quiet, I bought up all the bonds on the Haiti debt I could lay my hands on, and made 400,000 francs, of which I consciously paid you 100,000. You spent it as you wished, but that was your affair. In March, there was talk of a railway concession. 3 companies presented themselves, each offering equal securities. You told me that in your instinct, and though you pretended to know nothing about speculation, I consider, on the contrary, that you have a very clear comprehension of certain affairs. Well, you said your instinct told you that the privilege would be given to a so-called Southern company. I instantly subscribed 2/3 of the company's shares and made $1 million out of the deal. I gave you 250,000 francs for pin money. What have you done with it? But what are you driving at, monsieur? Cried the Baroness, trembling with anger and impatience. Have patience, madame, I am coming to it. In April, you dined with the minister. The conversation turned upon Spain, and you heard some secret information. There was talk of the expulsion of Don Carlos. I bought some Spanish bonds. Your information was correct, and I made 600,000 francs the day Charles V crossed the Via d'Ossa. Of these 600,000 francs, you had 50,000 crowns. They were yours, and you disposed of them according to your fancy. I do not ask you to account for the money, but it is nonetheless true that you have received 500,000 francs this year. Then, 3 days ago, you talked politics with Monsieur Debray, and you gathered from his words that Don Carlos had returned to Spain. I sold out, the news was spread, and a panic ensued. I did not sell the bonds. I gave them away. The next day, it transpired that the news was false, but it cost me 700,000 francs. Well, since I give you a quarter of my profits, it is only right that you should give me a quarter of what I lose. The quarter of 700,000 francs is 175,000 francs. That is ridiculous, and really, I do not see why you should bring Debray's name into this affair. Simply because if you don't happen to have the 175,000 francs I claim, you have lent it to your friends, and Monsieur Debray is one of them. For shame! No gesticulations, screams, or modern drama, if you please, madame. Otherwise I shall be compelled to tell you that I can see Monsieur Debray having the laugh of you over the 500,000 francs you have handed to him this year, and priding himself on the fact he has finally found that which the most skillful gamblers have never discovered, that is, a game in which he wins without risking a stake, and is no loser when he loses. The Baroness was boiling with rage. "You wretch," said she, "you are worse than despicable. But I note with pleasure, madame, that you are not far behind me in that respect. You would insult me now. You are right. Let us look facts in the face and reason coolly. I have never interfered in your affairs, except for your good. Treat me in the same way. You suggest that my cash box is no concern of yours. Be it so. Do as you like with your own, but do not fill or empty mine. Besides, how do I know that this is not a political trick, that the minister enraged at seeing me in the opposition and jealous of the popular sympathy I enjoy is not conspiring with Monsieur Debray to ruin me? As though that were likely! Why not? Whoever has heard before of such an almost impossible thing as false telegraphic news? Yet in the last 2 telegrams, some signs were interpreted quite differently. It was done on purpose for me, I am sure of it. Monsieur Debray has made me lose 700,000 francs. Let him bear his share of the loss, and we will continue business together. Otherwise, let him declare himself bankrupt for the 175,000 francs, and then do what all bankrupts do. Disappear. He is quite a charming man, I know, when his news is correct, But when it is not, there are 50 others in the world better than he. Madame Danglars was simply overwhelmed, but she made a supreme effort to reply to this last attack. She sank into a chair, thinking of the strange chain of misfortunes that had befallen them one after another. Danglars did not even look at her, though she did her best to faint. Without saying another word, he opened the door and went into his room. When Madame Danglars recovered from her semi-faint, she thought she must have had a bad dream. Well, things are going downhill for Danglars quickly. Let's see where they end up. See you next time.